Hi, this is Nathan Halvorsen, and this is my final exam video for Administration 100. Student number 204-161. When talking about business, it is important to know what the business cycle is. This can be used by many key terms as well as a very easy diagram. So if right here is your equilibrium line, it will always start, every company will start out with expansion, leading to a peak, and after the peak is concluded, then you'll go back into recession, back to the equilibrium line. When you cross down the equilibrium line, that is your depression. Your depression then hits a peak down here, goes back to equilibrium, and the same cycle is repeated over and over and over. So expansion leads to your peak then goes back to recession. This area we call transparity. So you have expansion, peak, recession, transparity, depression, and on and on and on. Right here, this is your steady growth line, and this right here is your trough, and the overall cycle line of the business. Expansion leads to your peak, goes back into recession, which causes the transparity. Down here we have the depression, trough, steady growth line, and then the same process is repeated over and over and over again. And that is your business cycle diagram. Now with your diagram, it is important to know which type of companies will perform well at each of these points. And it's a very simple variable. It's money. It's no secret in today's world that whoever has the most money is probably going to be more successful. It's just the way it is. The more money you have, the more opportunities you can create within your company, the better out there your company will be, and so on. So when companies with less money or individuals with less money go into depression or recession, they can't keep up as well as companies that have more money and can sustain the amount of money lost at these situations and points. This is very common in our society, no matter where you are in the world. The companies that can overcome obstacles and overcome drops in recession and depression are able to succeed in our society and further themselves forward. And that's why the business cycle is very important. The Canadian government plays many roles in Canada's economy and society. So in class we learned about 6 of these terms, but I'll explain 5 of them. So first, you have the customer as a form of government, basically. So your business is on one side and the government's on the other side. Business sends goods and services to the government, and the government sends money back to the business. We, as the people of society, are obviously the consumers. We're buying the goods and services from the business over to government. Government sends money to the business, and it's just a never-ending cycle. Regulatory is another term, and this is basically just the makings of bylaws and acts and basic rules in our society, and this just helps keep the peace within Canada and societies all around the country. Competitor is basically just, or competition, whatever you want to say, is basically just everybody fighting for the consumer, and how the consumer is the nucleus of everything, and how you have the individual, the government, and the business all connected to it. Taxation agent is the 4th term, and this is basically your revenue tax and your income tax in society. And a provider of incentives, this can be your tax returns for university students or anybody at a certain age, any money you get in return from the government can basically be summed up as this. When discussing the terms stocks and bonds, they have many similarities, but they are also vastly different. A stock essentially is you're buying an ownership of the company or the business and putting your faith in it. Meanwhile, a bond is just basically an entity to the company. It's a loan essentially that you're going to pay back over a certain amount of time. So if you're buying a stock, if the company does well, your stock will go up. It'll generate more money. It'll be worth more. However, if the company does poorly, then your stock will essentially be worth nothing or a lot less money than you originally would have liked to get in return. So the key characteristic when discussing these two terms would just have to be the risk factor. When obviously a stock is a way riskier play if you wanted to get into this than a bond ultimately would be, just because a bond is a loan, you're going to pay it back over time, but a stock essentially dictates how well the company does, right? Company does great, your stock perfect, generates more money, good. However, if the company does poorly, it's not going to be worth as much or a lot less, and you'll be out a significant amount of money. This next portion deals with some terms, most commonly imports and exports. So imports essentially are goods and services you're bringing into your country, while exports are goods and services you're taking or sending away to other countries. So import and export, that creates a trade surplus. So your trade surplus is the positivity when your exports are generating more money than your imports. Then that leads to a trade deficit, which is the opposite, which is when your imports are costing more money than your exports are generating. So Canada, when talking about us as a country, we are a prime example of a net exporter. This is just due to the fact that we export a lot of our oil that we generate here. Most of our oil comes from prairie provinces like Alberta is the main one, and that's why we are classified as an net exporter, just because the energy we cannot sustain, so send the oil away. When talking about entering the business world and how to get involved if you're new, doesn't just have to be drop all your money and hope for the best. No, you can take it in many different ways. Your first one could just be something as simple as working for the company, getting involved, studying it, see how it works, see what happens when it's producing money, what happens when it's losing money, why these things are happening. That could be one reason. A second option for you could be to become an entrepreneur, to invest in a company. It doesn't have to be a lot. It can just be a little, just so you understand, okay, this company is on the rise, maybe I want to add a little more. Or if you think it's going to hit a downfall, put in less, basically. And thirdly, you could start your own business. Many people nowadays, especially in today's world, they're starting their own business. They don't like the idea of maybe becoming a university student or something. Some people are starting businesses right from their home, and they are becoming very successful. I wouldn't recommend this method, but lots of people have shown it to be effective, while also lots of people have affected it to be non-effective. So your pros and cons for these. Let's start out with becoming your own business owner. So pros, you learn about business very quick. Learn very quick, obviously. And why this is? Well, because you're your own owner. You manage everything. This is throwing you right into the fire, and it's showing you what it's like. Cons? A con, I would say, is you don't know what you're doing. Maybe you do, but you don't have the experience to maybe keep up with all this stuff. So experience is definitely a huge point when discussing the concept of starting your own business. I would say for this method there's many more negatives and cons than there would be pros. So moving on to the next one, if you're investing or becoming an entrepreneur, some pros. It's your money, right? You put in as much as you want. You get to show where your faith lies in a company. This is all in judgment, right? So this is showing your judgment within a company. So this makes you learn about business just by seeing, okay, it's on the rise, it's on the rise. Oh no, it hit its peak and now it's on the downfall. What's going on? It's going into a recession. Why was I gaining money and why am I losing money? Your con for entrepreneurship is it's risky, right? It's your money. You can't control it. You have no control. You can either gain money or lose money. There's usually no, okay, it stays the same. Most of the time, a company either succeeds or it fails. There's no, So that would probably be your biggest con, is just you have no control. You put your money in, you hope for the best. It's a gamble. And thirdly, just getting involved. There's not too many cons, but a pro would just be you get your foot in the door. You understand what business is like. A con would be you're wasting time. Unless you're younger, you're not really learning. You're just kind of staying stagnant. You're not investing. You're not getting really down dirty into the business. You're just kind of staying put, which is fine. I'd say that even can be turned into a positive, but it's the fact that you're not producing. You're not getting down and dirty with the business to understand. So con, not real effective. And this is kind of broad. I'd say it's not effective money-wise, but knowledge-wise it is. And those are 3 ways to get into business for yourself, no matter what your age is. Now, if I had to choose between these 3 of which one I'd get into, I like to live more on the risky side when it comes to money. I don't like to play it safe, sort of. I like to, okay, I want to be able to make money. I don't want to just stay there, but I also understand the reason for losing money. So out of those 3, I wouldn't go as far as to create my own business, but I definitely would invest and possibly become an entrepreneur. That's just how I am. The tendencies that I've created over the past couple years. I like to gamble on sporting events and things like that. So investing and becoming an entrepreneur would definitely be the route that I would take. So the final topic for this final exam video is to discuss Blue Gold and its themes and why it's a problem and why it's important. Well, first off, its theme is just water around the world. Why are we paying for it when it's basically a given as a human, right? It's a natural thing on the earth. Why do we have to pay so much money to get it? And why are some people suffering because they don't have access to it and they can't get it because their country is just living in poverty and they can't. So Blue Gold, why is it not free? Why are powerhouse countries like China and the US able to get all the water they want just because they have money. Meanwhile, extremely poor or countries such as Africa barely can survive just because they're not as rich and powerful as China and the United States. So societies are getting vastly dismantled because water is obviously a huge part in human survival, and it's how we grow. So when certain countries aren't able to have access to it and can't afford it, it creates a large distinction between the high countries in our society and the low. So dominant countries obviously are able to succeed more because they have access to it and they can generate money off water and water companies and stuff like that. But poor countries and countries at war or something like that, just they simply can't do it. They don't have access to it. They can't expand their country just because they can't do it. They don't have access, and they don't have money. And when you don't have money, you can't succeed. You can't rise your country. You're always going to be on a decline. And Blue Gold's trying to explain that. It's explaining, okay, maybe water shouldn't be this big thing where a large amount of money needs to be spent to access it and to drink it, basically. And it talks about yeah. If you ask me what my opinion is on it, it's I agree with some of the main points with the theme and the concept, but ultimately I'd have to side against it just because the amount of money you have in today's world explains how successful you are. And obviously it is unfair, but that's kind of how our society operates. Is the people and the countries with the most money are successful. Meanwhile, there's a large range in successful to poverty. And even with something as simple as water, I feel like you need to reward the wealthier in our society more than you need to become more equal. As bad as that sounds, it's just kind of how our economy stays the way it is. You need that division to succeed, right? If everybody was the same, it wouldn't work out because you have a large gap in populations and other things like that. So ultimately I'd have to say I disagree with it, just because for example, what happens if the United States runs out of water supply because it's being shared equally all around the world, and now India, for example, has a surplus in water, more water than they need, and now we have the US, which doesn't have enough water. So there's just kind of that inequality between countries and nations that creates water, right? Okay, yeah. And this concludes my Administration 100 final exam video. Once again, my name is Nathan Halvorsen, and thank you for watching.